If I spent as much time analyzing Al-Qaeda as I've spent deconstructing Toby Keith's video for Whiskey Girl, we probably would have won the war on terrorism last April.
This is I Don't Even Own a Television. 4. A decade of curious people and dangerous ideas.
1, 2, 3. There are books that are good. There are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all. 'Cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
Welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about bad books. My name is J.W. Friedman.
I am Chris, Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs Wacky Random Collision.
Purple Monkey Dishwasher.
Pop culture.
Unrelated things are funny. Anyway, so this is a show where we talk about books that are not so good. And I know sometimes that causes some strife amongst our listener base because we talk about things that they used to like when they were younger, and sometimes people have a hard time separating that from what's actually quality or what they're into now.
So basically what we're saying is sometimes, we take your sacred cows to the sacred cow slaughterhouse, and we just eviscerate your beloved items of your childhood. And this time around, the Air Force Ones are on the other foot, and that foot is kicking us squarely in our hinders.
Yeah, because we're both middle-aged men, I think it's safe to say at this point. And we're going to talk about a collection of essays by the one, the only Chuck Klosterman, who I have to admit was pretty influential in my thinking in my early 20s to a point that kind of embarrasses the hell out of me. Rereading this was a slap of reality. It was a cold slap in the face about just kind of what kind of person I was back then and the kind of things I found entertaining, how much I've outgrown them, and how glad I am that I have.
Let's go a bit deeper because I have a very similar, story. I remember the book Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs as
random,
kind of revelatory for me the year I read it, which I'm gonna say is, I don't know, maybe 2005-ish, 2006-ish, somewhere in there. And I hadn't really heard of Klosterman before that much. I remembered some of his, ephemera for Spin. I saw it had a funny name and a cute cover, so I picked it up cheap. And, all of a sudden it was oh, these are record store arguments, but on the page, and they're really kind of funny. And he talks about stuff that nobody else bothers to talk about. Although even then I was this guy, for an adult male, spends too much time watching Saved by the Bell, and I don't think there's any non-creepy reason for it.
Oh, there's a creepy reason for it, but we'll get into that later in High Points, Low Points. But I kind of agree. I don't even know if I had the self-awareness to recognize that any of it was kind of strange. I just really remember thinking this guy's into the same stuff I'm into, and he has kind of the same sense of humor as me, and I really like his irreverent take on pop culture, and all of this stuff is good. And so this one, 4, is I think the first and only book of his that I've read, but it really embedded itself into my subconscious, and I think I spent a great deal of my early 20s kind of embodying this persona, whether intentionally or not, but kind of the high fidelity, smug, record nerd, I have opinions about every band in the world and I'm going to tell you why yours are wrong, sort of attitude. And reading this just put me right back there, and it was really uncomfortable. So the point being is what a lot of you sometimes think we're doing to you, we're now doing to ourselves because it's only fair, right?
So we're ruining our own childhoods, and by childhoods we mean our 20s, because we were perpetually adolescent man boys.
I'm just going to say, once you reach a certain point in your life, I think the 20s, in retrospect, do qualify as childhood. I know very few fully realized men in their early 20s. Just going to say that. Sorry, listeners, if you fall in that category. I'm sure right now you think you got it all figured out. Let me tell you. Once you start getting age spots and gray hairs, you're going to look back and be maybe that thing that I thought was really important about Def Leppard was kind of stupid.
Do you still sleep on a mattress on the floor? Then you're not a grown-up.
Yeah, you haven't figured life out, no matter how many complicated opinions you have about hair rock bands from the 80s. But anyway, moving on. Yeah, this is Chuck Klosterman 4, which from heretofore, no pun intended, will be referred to as Chuck Klosterman IV because I think it's funnier.
And because that is how it is presented. Why? Because that's how Led Zeppelin presented it. Huh?
Yeah,
Huh?
I get it.
Got a reference here.
Yeah, so in a way, well, I don't know if this is the time for it, but yeah, in a way, this was kind of the Ready Player One type writing of our generation. The difference being that it wasn't novelized, but still, it's just like it's a drip feed of cultural references of things that you were into when you were younger.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't want to get too much into this before plot in 60 seconds. So maybe we should just do that right now.
Nobody knows if you finish or not. You got 60 seconds to give them the plot. Plot in 60 seconds.
I'm ready to try if you are. And I've heard your cries. I've read your emails. I did not see your ats because do not at me. And I really think this time I've got it. I think I can pull it in under a minute, Jay.
Okay, well, are you ready?
Yes.
Begin.
Chuck Klosterman is an eager young trainer who goes out into the tall grass of celebrity interviews and profiles in search of incredibly wild takes about fame, morality, television, 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 hair metal bands, and television. He's captured all the insights. And in this book, he says, "My opinions, let me show you them." These include such lightning striking my dick level game-changing insights as Britney Spears. She's sexy, but virginal, and won't explain which one is true. Bono, and the rest of you two, are good at being famous, and probably want to be famous. Val Kilmer is a good actor, but owns 2 dictionaries. Some Mexican Americans enjoy the music of Morrissey. Eating nothing but chicken McNuggets for a week makes you feel bad. Oh, man. Okay, sorry. I just want to read a few more.
Okay,
just
no, that's fine. You know. I mean, I think we've long established the purpose of this segment now is for you to fail. I
really thought I was going to do this one, but you know what? I got cocky and I was reading deliberately very slowly.
I think maybe what happened is you let a little too much of the Klosterman-esque Gen X swagger infect your method of thinking, and you just stopped giving a fuck, man.
Well, even if I did, I was doing it with a wink in my eye and a sneer on my lips, so you can't tell if I was really trying or not.
That's true.
So it was just a joke, man. You can't take anything I did seriously.
The protective smokescreen of irony, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. Okay, the remaining insights in this that Klosterman wants to show you include: corporations have no responsibilities other than profit. Steve Nash is fast. Seeing rock bands on a cruise ship is weird. Led Zeppelin 4 is an influential album, and White Stripes are from Detroit. So I hope you guys had your brain pans securely fastened. I hope the steam vents in your ears had been freshly cleaned, because I know right now your brains are roasting with the insight and the hot takes straight from Klosterman's opinion pokeballs.
You know what's funny though is it sounds like you're being really reductive, and in a way you are, but that is mostly what you get from all of this. It's just surrounded by a bunch of kind of, post Lester Bangs-ish, well, here was my experience learning that White Stripes are from Detroit, but at the end of it, all you get is that White Stripes are from Detroit, right, and they're friends with other bands from Detroit.
Weird.
I know. It's a very surface level book. It's filled with little quips that you're supposed to find incredibly amusing, most of which did not age well at all.
Do you know the primary response to this book that I had? I'm going to go back to the well of The Simpsons. There is a characteristic gag that The Simpsons likes to do where when they really want to mock Bart the most, they'll have him reading Mad Magazine. And there's this one laugh that he only does when he's reading Mad magazines, and it'll be like this. So I think this happened in the late 80s, late 90s, early 2000s. He's reading Mad magazine. He flips open. He's like, "The lighter side of hippies. Wow, Mad magazine doesn't care who they offend. and it's the dopiest laugh imaginable. And that is 1000% the response to every Klosterman zinger, every Klosterman like mic drop, every Klosterman truth bomb is just, wow, you really, boy, buddy, you went there. Sweet joke about Triumph. Only I know who Triumph is. Canadians don't even remember Triumph.
And I think all he has to say about them is, they're usually associated with Rush.
Exactly.
That's a joke, folks.
Yeah.
Laugh. Yeah, so...
please clap.
Here's a bit of a personal anecdote. This is the only Chuck Klosterman book I've ever read. When I was in my early 20s, a woman I was dating at the time gave me a copy of this book before I departed on a flight and told me she got it because it reminded her of me. Which at the time I was reading it, I was like, man, this is cool. And then about 3 months later, she broke up with me. And I'm starting to think that there's a connection between reminding women of Chuck Klosterman and getting dumped. Just want to point that out. And not just aesthetically either. I mean, we were both bearded, schlubby men at that time in my life, for sure. This book literally made me shave my beard. I am right now, I have a mustache and a baseball hat, and I look like I should be talking about sports. And it's because of this fucking book.
I have not seen Jay's cheeks in months and months. You know, it is a fresh new experience for the recording process.
It was literally like, I want as little in common with this person I used to be as possible. So I've now reinvented myself as a non-Klosterman influenced individual.
I actually have a similar story, but it's not about Klosterman. It is about the previously mentioned novel High Fidelity, which was given to me with the comment, you should read this. This guy reminds me of you, by my mother.
Ooh.
And I had to read it 2.5 times before realizing what a diss that was. I'm not saying she was wrong. She was right. Message received, corrections applied. Just perhaps a little delay built into the process there, for which I apologize.
Yeah. So,
to everyone,
it's weird to me how much of this book like embedded itself in my head to the point where I think I was repeating things from this book and thinking they were original thoughts. Like throughout most of my 20s, like there's a section in here where he mentions Young MC's song "Bust a Move," which contains the lyric, your best friend Harry has a brother Larry. In 5 days from now, he's going to marry. He's hoping you can make it there if you can, because in the ceremony, you'll be the best man. And then he goes on to strike it as strange that his best friend Harry isn't going to be Harry's brother's best man. And why would he invite a stranger to be a best man? And I swear to God, I've had this conversation like 6 times with people since reading this book, every time that song comes on. And so when I got to that chapter, I was like, oh my God, no, it's a Chuck Klosterman joke that I've been unconsciously repeating. However,
I feel you. Do you remember when we did Myth Conceptions with Dan?
Yeah.
I had that exact...
Dan Beckner of Wolf Parade, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we have famous friends.
Rockstar friend Dan Beckner. I did. When we read that and I realized I stole "We'll Burn That Bridge When We Come to It," you know, I would have been like 12 or 14 or something when I read that, and what I'm ripping off are bad dad jokes.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say it turns out that after having that realization, I Googled Young MC best friend Larry, and it turns out there were like hundreds of people making the same joke. So I do have the benefit of the doubt that this is out there in the ether. I think it struck many people as odd that Harry isn't going to be Larry's best man. But yeah, odds are I absorbed that from a Klosterman book and was just parroting it without realizing it. And that makes me so embarrassed of myself.
Right. I've had lots and lots of these kinds of conversations, and I'm still more or less willing to have them as long as they're kind of a good-natured, you know, hey, did you ever notice this? That's kind of funny. Cool. Did you ever notice this? That's kind of funny. Like, you know, we've talked about this. When the mics aren't running, that's largely what we do.
Yeah.
But when it's this competitive one-upsmanship, smugger than thou, I'm super smart thing, which this book strikes me as,
absolutely,
it is just repellent. So, like, if you said that to me, I would probably be like, that's I'd never noticed that, because I had never noticed that. But when I heard Klosterman do it on an audiobook, and I'm not going to make fun of his voice, too much, but I'm going to say two things.
Yeah, please don't make fun of guys with high, reedy, nasal voices on this show. I take that very personally.
Look, I do not have room to make a lot of negative comments about people's voices. Like, yes, I get it. I sound like Tom Servo on a bad day. Like, noted. Thank you. But I will say that the experience of listening to this was kind of unpleasant for two reasons. One, and I got the audiobook through my library app, and it was notably low quality. I think it was mono. It sounded, even through my half-decent headphones, it sounded as though I were listening to it through a clock radio speaker in 1986. So that's kind of unpleasant. The second thing is the way he speaks is 100% the same as Randall, the sidekick from Clerks. So it's this...
Oh, shit. Yeah, you played a little bit of it for me earlier, and you're right.
It's this smug, aggrieved, reactionary opinion about everything. And it was just a really unpleasant place to be for a while. And so if he said that thing about Young MC to me, like, because he did, it was in my ears. And like all I could think of was just like, wow, you have a lot of opinions about Young MC, bro. I'm going to go look at the cutout bin for a while. Why don't you hang out here? You know what I mean? Like, there's just no response possible to somebody who's trying that hard.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're going to talk about Young MC's Bust a Move, the cool thing to mention is that Flea is in the music video with pants covered with stuffed animals.
That is cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. Like, he has a bit of what I have always referred to as nerd voice, which is very prevalent in the software engineering industry, where it's not necessarily a vocal tone, but it's a particular cadence where somebody always sounds like they're explaining something to you and are frustrated before they begin. Like, it's not just like, oh, hey, what you do is you click over here and you click over here. It's like, so what you do is you click over here and then you click over here and then this happens.
And it's kind of burdensome that you're even like wasting my time that I have to explain this to you because obviously you should have come out of the box knowing this.
But it's like, even when it's like, hey, you know, where do you want to go for lunch? I kind of think Panda Express is kind of going to be crowded. So, yeah, there's a particular cadence, and he has it, and it drives me insane.
Jay has never come closer to having something bounced off his forehead while we record. I don't know why, but, like, my blood pressure just spiked.
But anyway, aside from his voice, I'd like to talk a little bit about the content. This book is a collection of essays and then one short story.
The noise you're hearing is me getting up from my chair, slamming the door behind me, opening my car door.
I'd like to talk about the content. Okay, later.
Come on, damn it, start.
I'm like yelling in the background, like, and the best thing about the Chuck Klosterman book is...
The thing about Ratt is that they're not just round and round. They're singular MTV hit from 1984.
Why are you rolling your window up? No, but so this is a book of essays and then one short story, which deserves probably its own discussion, maybe even a mini episode. Or maybe we just ignore it entirely because it is the stupidest thing I've read in a long time.
For the short story, I think, let's bracket that. Let me just contextualize it for you. If you remember our episode on Love Monkey with Mara Johnston. Hi, Mara.
Hey.
Imagine that, only less charming, shorter, and less skillfully written.
And for some reason, there's a bunch of stuff about PCP written by someone who's obviously never experienced it.
He claims he's done it twice by accident.
I really have a hard time believing that. I have done PCP once by accident, and I could not have gone into my job and function like this character does. So, yeah, I do not believe Mr. Klosterman, unless it was, you know, I don't know. Does PCP come in varying strengths?
I'm going to be totally honest. I have never done PCP. There, I said it.
I just smoked a bowl of weed once that someone had put some on top of and not told me, which is not a cool thing to do. Don't do that to your friends. Anyway.
I didn't know you liked it wet. Training Day reference.
Oh, that is. Yeah, you're right. Forgot about that. But anyway.
Motherfuckers act like they forgot about Dre.
Now we're officially in the spirit of the content of this book. So it's a collection of essays that are mostly, I would say, profiles or opinion pieces. And can I kind of give an example of each just boiled down to their essence?
I wish that you would.
Okay. This is the template for a Chuck Klosterman celebrity profile. You know that preconceived notion you had about musician, celebrity, athlete? Well, it's probably wrong. Once I interviewed the celebrity about unrelated topics because I'm clever. And you know what? That thing you thought, it's wrong. Or maybe it's not.
Before we move to opinion piece, can I go a little on that?
Yeah, sure.
So I want to ask you, Jay, what is the point of a feature article on a famous person? Because that's the first third of this book is feature articles, usually from Esquire, a couple from Spin, on famous people. What is the point of that?
Learning more about Chuck Klosterman.
Intriguing. He answers that question in some of the ancillary matter. His claim is it's a rather rudimentary process. You ask people questions, then you write down the most interesting things they say. The problem is he's extraordinarily bad at that, as he reveals in some of the other matters. Like he has this not very satisfying interview with Bono from U2, and in a footnote he says,
Bono, isn't it Bono?
I don't care.
Bono was Cher's husband.
Don't care.
Okay.
You're probably right, but
I was going to let it fly once, but
right. In a footnote, he mentions that he sees a documentary where he's struck because Bono says the same things he said to Klosterman and emphasizes the same words in them. But then he says, well, I guess that makes sense. The documentary maker and I asked a lot of the same questions. The problem is the documentary guy was asking the questions 2 years before Klosterman gets around to it. And I just want to say, if 2 years can pass for you two, one of the most famous groups of people on the planet, and you can't think of any new and interesting questions over that time, you might not be very good at your job. You know, so to me, what a feature should be for of a famous person is you sort of hold up the image of that person, which everybody presumably knows about. That's part of what it means to be famous. And then you show some things that you discovered in interviewing them, and you show how those things are sometimes the same, sometimes different. They interrelate and deepen your understanding, right? But Klosterman literally can't do that because he is probably the most intellectually incurious writer I have ever read. He's fundamentally incapable of understanding that a famous person might also be a person.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He just doesn't get it.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's put a pin in this and come back to it because I want to talk about a couple of the essays in detail, and definitely one of them is the U2 one in the context of what surrounds it. So before we get to that, I just want to, real quick, the template for a Klosterman opinion piece, which is remarkably similar. It's, you know that preconceived notion you had about movie, album, musical genre? Right. Well, it's probably wrong. Here's a bunch of smug bullshit that reads exactly like David Foster Wallace, except dumber, that reinforces my point. So you know what? That thing you thought, it's wrong. Or maybe it's right.
Yeah. My friend Mo once wrote a thing about Malcolm Gladwell, where she said his complicated process - to intuit or to counterintuit - and I was just like, oh my God, you know, it's a little overused, but I really did think like, hello, police.
Yeah.
I've just seen a murder. And
could someone call the burn ward?
Yeah, exactly. Klosterman is a lot like that, but he's not so much a contrarian as he is a reactionary.
He's a reactionary ironist. Like, he hates things that are popular. He loves things that are not popular that he considers lowbrow, but he treats them with this kind of distance disdain where he's like, I like this because it's stupid. And it's so not fun to read.
I want to disagree a tiniest bit, right? Because he sort of dislikes things that are popular, except that, like, all he's fundamentally interested in is TV. He's one of those guys who thinks the real world road rules elimination challenge was interesting to think about and good to watch, right? He's very defensive about watching the Ashley Simpson TV show.
But he can't admit that he enjoys any of these things. It all has to be with the qualifier of, it's just a great illustration of how stupid we are as a culture, and like, isn't it ironic and dumb that people would even want to participate in this game? That's why I watch it every week.
I don't think he's actually there. I honestly think he's like, I watch it, I like it. If you think that's bad, it's because you're a classist snob and can't admit it. Like, look, if you want to make fun of me, and they're like, you as Klosterman, if you want to make fun of me because I thought I was more interesting than other people because I liked Richard Hell and the Voidoids when I was 13... Like, if you want to think less of me because I thought that of myself, you know what? That is fair. But the problem is Klosterman then gets up on his hind legs and puts a little bass into his voice and tells me that he's more interesting than I am because his favorite band is Kiss, who've sold 40 million records in America. That's about a Kiss record for every 8 or 9 people in this country.
I think the divide we're facing here is maybe the type of people we were when we were younger. To me, contrarianism was latching onto something that was, really popular despite being not very well regarded by like critics or my indie friends.
Right.
And then defending the hell out of it, but from the position of this thing that you all think is stupid and dumb is actually brilliant because it's stupid. And I feel like that's where he's coming from most of the time, and that sort of drives me crazy. But I could totally see maybe if you don't relate to that particular element of it, you could take him at face value a lot easier. For me, I think Klosterman's appeal when it comes to things like Kiss, Def Leppard, Ratt is more like, like all my journalist friends think this sucks.
Right. I think it's good.
Yeah. I think it's good because they think it sucks.
Yeah, I think, I really, all my rough draft notes had the word contrarian. But then I had like my 18th cup of coffee yesterday and decided I didn't think contrarian. I really do think reactionary. Fundamentally, I don't think Chuck Klosterman has had anything enter his life that he genuinely loved, except for new TV shows, since he was 12 years old. That's why I think he's a reactionary. I think all his tastes and all his cultural inputs are basically frozen when Ratt was at the top of the charts, when Kiss was trying out albums without makeup.
Yeah. Lick It Up and all of those.
Exactly. Yeah. Crazy, 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 crazy nights. I think that's a direct quote.
I believe so. It's interesting that you mentioned this because I want to call back to something you mentioned earlier, which is him being into Saved by the Bell more than any grown adult should.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason for that. And like sometimes we read books where the author reveals more of themselves than I think they're revealing. And this is definitely one of these books because like there are at least 6 times in this book where we start even in the first essay where he talks about Britney Spears being sexy because she's virginal and a high school girl. Then later on, there's a scene where he goes in an essay where he goes to Goth Day at Disneyland and is very viscerally excited about being set next to a cute high school goth girl on a roller coaster. Then later on, he says his favorite music video trope is the spontaneous sex party in the classroom, like Van Halen's Hot for Teacher. And yikes, dude. He also includes the phrase, sadly, the girls in this spontaneous sex party in the classroom video don't look 17.
No, man, that's about the culture. That's not about him. He's indicting.
No, I refuse to believe that. It's creepy as hell, but it speaks to the kind of Arrested Development that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the show because he also talks about that.
He probably has something incredibly boring to say about the band.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a dude who never graduated high school in his mind, basically, and also that leads to some really creepy writing about women, which, hey, let's get into some of the essays real quick here.
Yay!
Because I'd like to start out with just to mention a few things about the very first essay in this book, and we eventually will get to high points, low points, but I feel like there's a little too much to say.
I will just say off the top, the first essay is about Britney Spears. It is the only, if you are interested in reading this book because of the things that we're saying about it, do not read this book. But if you're desperately interested, everything you need to know about Klosterman is in that essay. His inability to understand the difference between an image and a person, his incuriosity about the existence of people other than himself, his
relentless reluctance to give agency to women.
Yep, it's all there.
Yeah.
His fetishization of the sexuality of very young women.
Yep. Yeah, so this article is called Southern Fried Sex Kitten Bending Spoons with Britney Spears. And like basically what it is a dude in his late 20s, I guess at this point, completely like almost harassing a young woman while talking about her vagina for like 13 pages, making her incredibly uncomfortable in service of some bullshit theory that she lacks any sense of self-awareness. And like, I think this is really, really indicated in one of her replies to a question that isn't printed. So this is just printed as a quote coming from Britney Spears. That's just a weird question, she says. I don't even want to think about that. That's strange, and I don't think about things like that, and I don't want to think about things like that. Why should I? I don't have to deal with those people. I'm concerned with the kids out there. I'm concerned with the next generation of people. I'm not worried about some guy who's a perv and wants to meet a freaking virgin. And like, he plays this off as her not being aware of the fact that she's presented as a sex kitten. But it's like, what this actually is, dude, this is the sound of a woman telling you that you're being a creep and you need to stop because you're making her uncomfortable.
Let me read 2 quotes. I want to read the thing that immediately precedes what you read and the thing that follows what you read. Over the next 90 minutes, I will sit on a couch next to an ostensibly fully clothed Britney and ask her a battery of questions. Why do you dress so provocatively? I ask. She says she doesn't dress provocatively. But look at what you're wearing right now, I say. And I have a point, because I ask this while looking at 3 inches of her inner thigh, her entire abdomen, and enough cleavage to choke a muskox. Whatever that means. Also, one thing I want to say about Chuck Klosterman is he specifically names all of the editors that he worked with throughout the development of these pieces, and this is the most searing indictment I have ever seen of American magazine editing, because enough cleavage to choke a muskox is just dumb, even by the standards of Esquire magazine.
That's like dialogue from an episode of Deadwood. It does not belong in this article at all.
That's dialogue from the cutting room floor of Family Guy.
Okay. I was just thinking of it in like a swear engine voice.
And here's how he concludes that little passage of brutally interrogating Britney Spears with his shafts of insight.
Ugh.
And suddenly, something becomes painfully clear. Either Britney Spears is the least self-aware person I've ever met, or she's way, way savvier than I shall ever be. Okay, first off, I know where the arrow is pointing, my man. And second, kudos to you for dropping in the shall. You can't stop yourself from overwriting, even when you're missing the point. Great job.
I mean, that is awful. What also really bugs me is, like, this is a dude who allegedly understands the music business to the point where he's paid to write about it, but seems like totally unaware that this industry might exploit the hell out of an attractive young woman who isn't actively trying to be a sex object. Like,
what?
I'm sure Britney Spears was complicit and she knew what she was doing when she was wearing a Catholic schoolgirl outfit and dancing in that video and stuff like that, but she didn't make that decision, right? Like, I mean, this is an entire industry that's designed to fucking exploit, you know, both women and young people, and like it's a predatory business. And to refuse to acknowledge that and just be all like, she was showing 3 inches of her thigh, like, I don't know. It reminds me so much of all the gross stuff that got written about Marilyn Monroe back in the day, and it's just like, way to carry on the legacy of like the worst parts of celebrity journalism, my friend.
He's just like I say. So my first drafts, as I said, all included contrarian. I still think that's not quite right. My first drafts also included, like, one of them just said, Chuck Klosterman is dumb as hell. Some evidence. And I had to walk that back because I don't think he's dumb.
No.
I think he's extraordinarily intellectually lazy.
Yeah.
And as I've said before, intellectually incurious, but fundamentally just uninterested in the existence and experiences of other people, which makes it... We hear a lot about male mediocrity these days, And I think it is a pretty good example of male mediocrity that a guy who is just fundamentally uninterested in and incapable of registering the experience of other people has as a main part of his job getting sent to talk to those other people about their lives.
Yeah, let's move on real quick because I want to come back to that in a second. First, I want to talk about the YouTube profile just real quickly that you had already alluded to.
The Bunu interview.
Yeah, the interview with Bunu.
Okay.
There's a part in this profile where they're driving in Bono's new car, and he stops and sees some U2 fans and picks them up, gives them a ride around in front of this journalist, and is like, "Hey, want to listen to the new album?" and like totally blows some kids' minds and stuff. And I think it's really interesting coming right off of the Britney Spears thing,
because the kids go wild for U2.
Yeah,
like if the 13-year-olds were deprived of their U2 albums, I shudder to think what would happen, because that's definitely who's into U2.
But like later on after that, you know, he has a brief moment of doubt about whether this was a real moment or a manufactured one, and then he asks another member of the band who's like, "No, Bono's just like that." Yeah. And he just accepts that, and it's so fucking infuriating to me that he won't give Britney Spears the slightest benefit of self-awareness or agency, but seems like completely okay with just believing every dumb Bono story that he's told. And I wonder why. But on the other hand, while being far too credulous for its own good, it does include probably one of my favorite ridiculous rock band quotes ever.
Okay.
And this was written, 2003, 2004-ish, I want to say, somewhere around there.
Oh, yeah, all these are from roughly 2004.
Bono says, "We, as a band, feel strongly about the iPod. We, as a band, talked about the idea for an iPod years ago. We, as a band, are big fans of Apple." And it made me laugh so fucking hard, especially, you know, now with the hindsight of that fucking debacle where Apple pushed the U2 album onto everyone's iPhone without asking them first. It's like... There is nothing that rocks harder than you fucking loving a giant corporation.
A couple of pages later, there's the sentence, "It's why U2 can become business partners with Apple without giving up on rock and roll."
U2 gave up on rock and roll a long time before they became business partners with Apple, but
I don't even really know what that means. That's also, that is a characteristic problem with Klosterman's writing, is he reaches very, very hard for the quip or the aphorism, but frequently it is not the most packed with meaning phrase that one could have striven for. Again, that's kind of what I mean about the indictment of editing. It's sort of like, yep, there's a lot of letters that are in word-like shapes on the page. That'll fill this page. Now I've got to go review an ad for Seagram's and a Rumpelmans ad, and then we can go to press.
So there's only a couple more essays in here that I'm going to force you to talk about in any sort of detail at all. But
we have not gotten to one segment.
No, we haven't. But this is by design. This is by design because the structure of the book kind of. If we do high points, low points, we're going to run out of, or we're not going to get to talk about all the shit that we need to talk about. So maybe this will be a long episode. Who cares? I want to talk about Viva Morrissey a little bit.
Oh, God, do we have to?
We do, because it is amazing to me that there was a time in the world where some, I guess, managing editor at a newspaper had the idea of, seems like a lot of Latino kids in Southern California are really into Morrissey. Yeah. Let's send the whitest guy on our staff to figure out why, like it's an anthropological expedition. Mm-hmm. Instead of hiring a Latino person from LA to explain why they like Morrissey. And this is just like, it's not intentionally offensive, but it's one of the most offensive things I've read in a really long time, because he really does write this like he's on like a National Geographic trip to explore the wild world of Mexican American Morrissey fans, and it's so fucking annoying.
It's really, really cringeworthy, and I get that he's probably playing that up, but I also get
but playing that up is also really racist and fucked.
Yeah, this guy is a little bit like me. He's a tallish redhead from the Middle West. You know what I mean? And if he's playing up his, wow, I'm just a fish out of water, believe me when I tell you that the people around him are experiencing the sensation of their skin absolutely crawling, because that is a way to make everyone around you deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I mean,
which I'm just going to go way out on a limb here and say, if one were interested in getting people's stories and perspectives and voices down, one might not go dramatically out of one's way to make them uncomfortable. One might take the Joe Mitchell approach of being a good listener who drew fascinating stories out of the widest swath of humans he could find, for example.
No, but instead what you get is people that are so reluctant to talk to this guy that my friend Jackson described this essay's main point, and I think he was right on point, as saying basically the moral, or kind of the boiled down essence of Chuck's conclusion here is Latino kids in LA are humans, and some humans like Morrissey. This is why Latino kids like Morrissey.
Yeah.
And it takes him about 13 pages to get there, and ends with, you mentioned before, him reaching for the aphorism. Mm-hmm. In this case, in order to get the aphorism, he finds two incredibly racist white teenagers to interview. Yay. And then quotes them in a way that I think you're supposed to think that this is funny. One of these two teens says, people have actually said to me, you like Morrissey? That's weird for a white guy, and I find that completely bizarre. Hensley tells me, momentarily dropping his veil of irony for a grain of semi-sincere annoyance.
Which is, by the way, the best description of his opinion pieces one could ask for.
Most of the other people who came here wouldn't even know who Jarvis Cocker is. They only like Morrissey. We just came here to make fun of people. But maybe that joke isn't funny anymore.
That's
a Smiths song,
it's a
folks.
Smiths lyric. Also, he misquotes it. You quoted the Smiths song correctly.
Yeah.
He writes perhaps, not maybe.
Oh, Jesus. Dude, fucking pick up discogs.org or something.
Which is, that is also one of the things that really bugs me about this is a lot of his career really rests on the idea that he knows what he's talking about and can juxtapose things in, fascinating ways because he has more knowledge at his fingertips than you. But then these juxtapositions work in ways that make you realize he doesn't know what he's talking about. I want to read a different passage from this, including a footnote that he adds that's supposed to be explanatory. This is addressing a contentious aspect of Latino fandom of Morrissey, because as we all know,
Morrissey is a huge racist?
No, slightly different. As we all know, Morrissey is gay, which is very interesting and something that we need to talk at length about. And as we also all know, Latinos are total homophobes.
I believe at that point Morrissey was claiming to be asexual.
I believe at that point Morrissey was claiming to be straight edge, and there's still a thing about Corona being Morrissey's favorite beer in this article, so
who knows?
IDK.
The man is an enigma.
True, wrapped in a racist riddle.
Yeah. And some track shorts.
And then, completely girded with one of the worst novels we've ever read.
Yeah, List of the Lost. Look it up, people.
Yeah. Anyway. Torres's take is pretty liberal. A few Latinos at the convention concede that Morrissey might be bisexual, but none would classify him as gay. People are always asking me if I'm gay because I have a photo of Morrissey hugging Johnny Marr, says Alex Diaz, a 16-year-old Smiths fanatic who plans on joining the Marines when he's old enough. My friends always ask me, why do you like these queers? But, he's probably just bisexual. His songs aren't all about guys. Look at Girlfriend in a Coma. That's about a girl. Footnote. Diaz's point about Girlfriend in a Coma is, in a technical sense, true. Of course, it should be noted that this is a song where the protagonist looks at his comatose acquaintance and reminisces about all the times he considered murdering her. It may also be less than coincidental that Girlfriend in a Coma is also the name of a novel by author Douglas Copeland, who publicly announced he was gay in 2005.
Wow.
I want to bracket the offensive bullshit here for a second. And
You mean all of it?
I want to just try to trace the chain of logic
Well, this
that
is...
Klosterman is advancing here.
If I can just interrupt for a second, this is a man who called Lost the greatest television miniseries ever made, so, you know, he's not really into logic that makes sense. But anyway, continue.
Okay. Question. Can we tell whether Morrissey is gay from his songs? I take that to be the issue here. Klosterman's answer. It is relevant to know that one of the pieces of art that this guy made had a title that another guy used later.
20 some odd years later.
And then said, guy 2, oh yes, by the way, I am gay.
Eureka! Holmes, the games is afoot.
So if I... Wait. Oh, that's a great call. So if I published a story called... Or if I wrote a song called A Study in Scarlet and then said, I'm gay, does that mean Holmes and Watson were gay?
Yes. That's, I mean, you just explained the theory.
So if I name my dog the Hound of the Baskervilles and then say I'm gay, does that mean Arthur Conan Doyle was gay?
I was just thinking.
How does this logic work? And I'm just going to explain how this logic works. I'm a glib, smug munch, and it doesn't. Also, probably I was a little stoned, so the connection made more sense in my head than it did on the page.
No, you're right on point, and I want to roll this into another example of Klosterman reporting on something that anybody other than Klosterman should have been reporting on. There is an entire essay in this about all-female hard rock cover bands that probably would have been very entertaining had it been written by a woman or even a man who respects women instead of a man who just wants to sexualize all of them and call one of the most popular and hardworking tribute acts in Southern California, quote-unquote, soccer moms.
Yeah.
It does include one of my favorite quotes ever, and it's not from Klosterman, and I don't think he thought it was funny or anything, but it rules hard. The vocalist from Cheap Chick, the Cheap Trick cover band, says, "My name is Christy, and I'm 41, and I'm proud to be 40-fucking-1." And that was like my favorite part of this book was that woman's quote.
We need to contextualize this a little bit for those of us who have not read this. Why does Jay say anybody else should have done this? Well, I think it has something to do with him meeting an all-female cover band of Led Zeppelin called Led Zeppelin, and it sounds like his first question was, Led Zeppelin, huh? Can I watch?
Yeah. It's gross.
Yeah.
And then he interrogates them about their sexuality, and when they remain mysterious about it, he decides that must be part of their mystique and not just them avoiding creepy-ass questions from a weirdo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not going to go like essay by essay because we still haven't done a segment and we're deep into the show. But I do, however, have two more brief observations. Speaking of interesting things in this book that were not said by Chuck Klosterman. Robert Plant gets one of the sickest burns I've ever heard in this. He just lets it all out there.
Yep.
It's in an interview with Robert Plant about how much he hates heavy metal, which is pretty funny.
Yep.
And then Klosterman just starts grilling him about why he hasn't done a Led Zeppelin reunion, and it includes this exchange. Klosterman, but couldn't you have toured with Page, Jones, and John Bonham's son Jason on drums? Robert Plant, what the fuck for? John Bonham's kid isn't as good as John Bonham.
This is one of those rare moments where Jay goes off book and completely steals one of my two high points.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that is by such a wide margin the best part of this book. Robert Plant, who I don't even care about particularly.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Saying, what the fuck for? Jason isn't as good as his dad, which I think is something that has been lurking under the surface of an awful lot of tours of my adult life. Like Jason Bonham, I'm sure he's a nice guy. He's quite a good drummer.
He is not John Bonham.
He is not John Bonham, and he has been, as they say, dining out on his last name for many a long year. I'm just saying, if his last name were Collision or Friedman,
yeah,
he would probably have a somewhat lower profile set of drumming gigs.
There's a
than he has.
bit of a whiff of the Dweezil and Ahmed Zappa about Mr. Bonham.
Dweezil shreds.
I mean, Dweezil is a great guitar player, but...
Actually, that's not true. Dweezil is a technically extraordinarily competent guitar player. Dweezil Zappa is also one of the most boring guitar players on the planet, unless you are a guitar player and deeply interested in fingering techniques.
One other thing I wanted to mention really briefly, and this is a question to you. There's an essay in this called Fargo Rock City that is apparently one of the first things he wrote professionally when he was a kid. And, like, do you think this is...
A kid of 24.
Yeah.
Like a post-college kid.
Do you think this is filler, or do you think he's honestly proud of this? Like, it's literally, like, just a piece about his local music scene that it reads like a scene report for Maximum Rock and Roll, but the bands all have stupider names. And, like, I want to know, was this to bust up the page count, or do you really think he thinks people are going to want to read this?
The thing is, this thing is what is the total page count? This is nearly 400. This is, including the index, which was desperately needed, a 374-page book, right? Including a 20-some-odd page short story.
Oh, God.
And...
Which, yeah, if we talk about the short story, it's going to have to be a bonus episode, or this will be 2 hours long. But just trust us when we say it's not good.
Like, this is one of the... We mentioned earlier the protective shield of irony. And this particular story is the one that's most deeply cloaked. Because he first introduces it by saying, I'm not including this because I think it's good. And then doesn't really say why he is including it. It really seems like he's just trying to, like, resharpen some axes he's been grinding about people who were mean to him at local shows 20 years before.
Yeah, and actually that's one thing we haven't mentioned is almost every essay in this is introduced with a really self-deprecating intro that's like, this isn't that good, but the reason it isn't that good is because X and Y. And it's like, bro, okay, first off, not every book of essays needs an introduction to them, and not every single one needs to be a pre-apology for something that you know people are not going to like. Like, nothing makes me want to read your work less than you starting it off by being like, well, this isn't good, but it's because...
Yeah. I will say it's less bad than his other one, which is this stunt piece about going to every psychic in Fargo and asking them about his career as a bowler, which is maybe relevant as a very early example of the
it's fucking Borat. It's Ali G.
Two things at once.
Yeah.
Right? It's psychics. That's inherently funny because women. And bowling. That's inherently funny because pudgy white guys. Which...
I mean, I like to bowl, and it is kind of funny, to be honest.
Okay, Chuck, but... Yeah. Let's be careful about the asparagus we cast.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just saying, as a dude who bowls frequently, I recognize that it's a pretty funny hobby.
I get it, but
it involves special shoes. I mean, anything that involves special shoes that don't, have some sort of skate mechanism attached to the bottom of them, it's kind of silly.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was not the worst thing in this, but it was also not the best. And he's got these like little footnote. I mean, this is the footnote heaviest one because it is about a very specific scene.
Yeah.
Right. So it needs some of the explanations, but also some of the explanations are just like book throw inducing.
Yeah. Okay. Now that you mentioned footnotes, and I think we're really late in the game here, we should probably do a segment. Let's do high points, low points. Here's a song.
High points are high, and low points are low. High points, low points, get ready to go.
All right, I am sorry to cut you off, but I think we need to exercise our demons in a more formal way. As you mentioned off mic, it is relentlessly on brand for what you described as record store guys to spend 2 hours talking about Chuck Klosterman. So I think we need to kind of hit the accelerator, move into high points, low points. So that's what we're doing. Do you have a high point?
Oddly, I do. So he goes deep on Roadhouse. That's possibly not a huge surprise. Roadhouse, of course, in the absolute pantheon of Swayze films. Up there with Point Break and To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
Yeah, but no one gets their throat ripped out in either of those movies. So.
Fair. But I want to read his riff on Roadhouse and then tell you what I learned from it. And this is my high point. Take, for example, the aforementioned Roadhouse. This is a movie I love, but I don't love it because it's bad. I love it because it's interesting in a very specific way. Outside the genre of sci-fi, I can't think of any film less plausible than Roadhouse. Every element of the story is preposterous. The idea of Swayze being a nationally famous bouncer with a degree in philosophy.
Oh, how would that happen?
The concept of such a super violent bar having such an attractive clientele. The likelihood of a tiny Kansas town having such a sophisticated hospital. The authenticity of ripping another man's throat out.
Woo!
Etc., etc., etc.
In the midst of life we are in death, etc.
Every single scene includes at least one detail that could never happen in real life. So does that make Roadhouse bad? No. It makes Roadhouse perfect. Because Roadhouse exists in a parallel reality that is more fanciful and more watchable than Lord of the Rings. The characters of Roadhouse live within the mythology of rural legend while grappling against exaggerated moral dilemmas and neoclassical archetypes. I don't feel guilty for liking any of that. Roadhouse also includes a monster truck. I don't feel guilty for liking that either.
Congratulations.
Here's what that taught me. You know how really lazy critics and really, really lazy comedians reject the premise of something and pretend that's a joke?
Yeah.
This taught me that fetishizing the premise is equally lazy and equally dull, because you just spent, I don't know, that's probably 90, 120, something like that words, I didn't count them, about Roadhouse that completely misses the point, that pretends things that virtually every movie shares are actually interesting.
Wait, you mean movies that aren't supposed to be true sometimes exist in a heightened reality?
Wait, movies mostly include conventionally attractive people? What? Rural places have hospitals? That doesn't sound right.
Oh, man. Okay, so
yeah, I learned an important thing, and I thank you for it.
So your high point was a bit more bitter and sardonic than mine, because my first high point is that I'm going to admit that occasionally David Foster Klosterman.
You mean Lester Bangerman?
Yeah, is capable of a good turn of phrase that can still make me chuckle, even now. It only happens a few times, but one of them was Fred Durst, who is universally perceived as rock's sleaziest baboon. That made me laugh really hard.
I just wanted that to be buffoon. I don't know why, but I did not like baboon there.
Yeah. And also, for most of my youth, Metallica fans made me nervous, just because I relate to that 100%.
I gotta say, the people who turned me on to Metallica were in my Alateen group.
Yeah, everybody I knew who liked Metallica as a teen was from deeply fucked up circumstances.
They were both 4 years older than me. I think they were high school juniors when I was in 8th grade. They were only talking to me because we had been all sent to Alateen together.
Yeah.
They loaned me a copy, and I'm only saying they because there were two of them, and I can't remember which one did it. They loaned me a copy of Garage Days Revisited, the fabled 598 EP on cassette. And this is not hyperbole. It changed the way I thought about music.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned on the show before, but I had a friend named Galen from an incredibly broken home who we used to smoke cigarettes on top of a Little Caesars together on the roof.
Yeah.
He only wore Metallica t-shirts. Like, he must have had a closet full of nothing but Metallica shirts. And they're definitely at that era, I guess this would have been for me around 88, 89. Like, most of the kids I knew who were really into Metallica, just, there was something a little threatening about them. So I did relate to that for sure.
But now that you've mentioned it, me imagining those two dudes menacing Chuck Klosterman in high school
is hilarious.
That's a high point for me for sure.
It makes me feel better because I can't be that much like Chuck Klosterman. I got invited on the roof to smoke cigarettes with the Metallica kids. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking a pro bullying stance, but sometimes putzes got to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, low points. First one.
Let's deplatform Klosterman.
Yeah.
A low point. Okay, I'm just going to build on your high point, if I might, and read a couple of the turns of phrase that I liked the least in this. We've been trying to start a rivalry with System of a Down by publicly denying the Armenian genocide.
Fuck that.
Just to see what would happen.
Fuck that. That's not a joke, dude.
You lose, Anne Frank.
Oh, yeah. Good. That shit has an edge so sharp you could cut yourself on the page.
In reference to the the guitar player, Robin Crosby of Ratt, passing away due to complications resulting from AIDS, it will be interesting to see whether the Hesher casualties now start piling up. I just want to say, this guy had a couple of year run as the ethicist in the New York Times Magazine.
Wow.
Right, where he would purport to answer ethical dilemmas written in by readers. And it's fairly clear to me that whoever hired him for that did not do all of the due diligence they might otherwise have done. Because this guy obviously has no moral center that is strong enough to withstand the allure of a cheap jack bullshit shock joke.
Yeah, I mean, this is one book that includes 2 jokes that reference different genocides as a punchline. Mm-hmm. Like, fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
And by the way, I left out possibly the most offensive one because I honestly can't even fathom a content warning that would allow it.
Yeah,
so,
no, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So if you thought the Anne Frank and the Armenian genocide shit was bad, it gets worse.
Yeah. It's radioactive. And by radioactive, I'm referencing the shitty 80s band that Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, have you heard of them, and Paul Rogers from Free, have you heard of them, had, and their one low-level hit, Radioactive.
I get it. So for me, I guess my first low point, since I've already misspoken and almost called him David Foster Wallace, is that there's an essay in this about going on a crazy cruise and having a wild time.
Record scratch.
Yeah, and this is a guy who has a book peppered with fucking footnotes, writes almost exactly like he's trying to be David Foster Wallace, and like subtitled it with the phrase, "A decade of curious people and dangerous ideas." Yet in the intro to his cruise piece, he claims to have never heard of a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again, just so he could avoid, like accusations that he was ripping it off, which he totally was. Like,
wait,
there's
what?
Yes. Maybe it's not in the abridged version, but he says something like, oh, wait, here it is, word for word. There are 3 main hurdles involved with the writing and reporting of this story. The first is that the definitive cruise story has already been written by David Foster Wallace, who published the essay A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again in 1995. This is evidently the most popular essay ever produced, so roughly 6,000 people have mentioned it to me during the 48 hours prior to this trip. Like, dude, you don't say that before you essentially reproduce something word for word. The only difference is that instead of just normal people on this cruise, they're rock and roll fans. But the story beats are exactly the fucking same. It was just a huge low point for me, for a dude who very obviously has modeled his literary style after Mr. Wallace, to then claim that he's never fucking read the shit and people had to remind him of it.
I have here with me 2 separate hard copies of books by Chuck Buck Klosterman. would you like to guess one name that is completely absent from the indexes of both? It is not David Foster Wallace.
I was going to say David Foster Wallace.
But he has been mentioned on this podcast recording session.
I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
That name is Mr. Lester Bangs.
Oh, yeah. He does actually mention Lester Bangs in this book, though.
It did not get indexed. And that is curious to me because there's a big shadow here, I would say.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Of Mr. Bangs.
There's some innocence abroad happening here.
So what does Klosterman get on the map with? It's a sort of pop culture savvy, depressed metal fan in the Midwest in a book called Fargo Rock City, which I have not read. But I can confirm that Bangs did that really well in 3 pages in 1977. CK has a very long maudlin riff on the death of Johnny Carson as the last truly unifying figure in America. In 1977 again, Lester Bangs writes, "We will never again agree on anything as we agreed on Elvis." I'm just going to guess that I could do this all afternoon.
Yes, and they're both like very racially problematic and have a hard time not coming across as incredibly paternalistic when talking about music that isn't created by white men. So there's that too.
And Lester Bangs was born in like 1950.
Yeah, so one of them has a little more of an excuse.
A little more of an excuse. Also, like, Bangs confronted his own racism extremely starkly in an essay that is still to this day extremely hard to read. Klosterman does not believe that race matters.
No, he doesn't.
In a fundamental way.
All right, low points. One more round.
You go first.
All right, so I think this is pretty obvious from everything we said, so I'll keep it short. Just the tone of this is overbearing in its smugness. Like, Klosterman has never met a topic he wouldn't condescend to, and like his professional love of low culture, in quotes, is done with like the performative wonder of the seasoned ironist, is the way I thought of it. Like the way he approaches things that he supposedly loves, like the Roadhouse thing you mentioned earlier and stuff, is not to get too academic here, but it's something that like Adorno or Greenberg would define as kitsch. Like, he is very much appreciating this from the position of an upper-class person looking at entertainment made for the quote-unquote lower class and appreciating it for how naive and silly it is. And that just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. We probably should have talked about this a little bit earlier, but I keep saying record store dude. And I am a retired record store dude myself.
Me too.
You know the vibe I'm talking about. The canonical moment of record store dudism in our culture, I think, and I think about this way too much, but do you remember when MTV was doing unplugged shows? A little band called Nirvana, who also loom large for both Klosterman and me, did the unplugged. And Kurt Cobain has a song intro that goes, "This is off our first album. Most people don't own it." And then they play About a Girl.
Yeah.
And the joke there is, we all know that Nevermind, the record that really broke Nirvana, is the second album. We're all in on it.
Yeah. Only the cool kids knew about Bleach.
Yeah. But by then, everybody knows there was this other record.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not like Pearl Jam's first record, which everyone forgets about.
So that's the joke.
That was some pure record store guy shit right there.
But all I want to say is, what would have made that even more perfect is if the next song Cobain had just said, "This is off our second album. Almost everybody owns it." Like, that to me would have killed. Right? And Klosterman is sort of the negative side of the coin of the record store guy. It's the guy who's always trying to prove a point, who's always trying to one-up you. The good version of it, I think in our culture, is represented by Tom Sharpling.
Yeah, for sure.
Longtime listeners know that there are no other podcasts, and we have no influences, and we hate everything.
Yeah, but definitely Sharpling and Worcester, if they existed, would be high on the list of things we're into. Exactly.
But they've got a couple of characters from their earlier days that are so Klosterman, but better. You know, like, there's literally guys who will go for 40 minutes just like, I don't know, it's dumb, I love it, I hate it, whatever. You know, Pudge, I think, is a good example of that. Before the turn of Pudge, I'm sorry, this is for obsessives only, but there's that. There's his original Rock Rotten Rule thing, which is perfect.
I got really excited when you brought it up because, like,
I'll do links to I'll do links in the show notes if you get interested in this.
One of the essays that, like, and I can't even remember which one it was, but I literally wrote, "This is Rock Rotten Rule, but not ironic."
Right.
Like when he starts talking about madness and like, I was just like, "Oh my god, this is Rock Rotten Rule." Which, if you haven't read it, or if you haven't heard that, Google it, or it'll be in the show notes. But
it'll be in the show notes. It's
an incredible comedy routine with this guy who spends an hour or so defending a fictional book that he's written that's just a list of which bands rock, which bands rot, and which bands rule, and it's quote-unquote the ultimate argument solver.
The ultimate argument solver, for sure. And all I'm going to say is, in the show notes, the character from Billy Berg, whose name I'm spacing right now, is to me just the most devastating takedown of Klosterman imaginable. It's also very funny in its own right.
Yep. Okay, so now you need another low point.
Oh, golly. Do I have any more? I do. Here's one. And it's, again, just about the writing. I've mentioned that it bugs me that he reaches for the aphorism and then, like, falls down and his pants fall down and he misses the free throw and doesn't get the aphorism. And I point and I laugh and I laugh and I laugh. Yeah. These things that give us pleasure, they are guilty of nothing. And neither are we.
Oh.
So that's not how the neither construction works. And you're also wrong about whether or not we're guilty of things.
Yeah.
This is in the context of a long, whiny thing about how he's furious that some people present polls that show that America is less popular than it used to be. And so Klosterman is actually, in some ways, astonishingly good at deflecting an argument into a non sequitur, right? So the New York Times publishes a poll showing that the United States is internationally not popular. What does he take this to mean? He takes this to mean high school kids worry about being liked, and that's the same thing as being popular. America shouldn't worry about being liked. America should worry about being good, and there is no such thing as America or us being bad, right? This was written in 2005.
Yeah.
Can anyone think of any reasons in 2005 America's reputation might not have been at its highest level?
I can think of a few.
I can think of a few.
Yeah.
So let's, pencils down. This is not an occasion for atting us. Just reflect on that, because Chuck Klosterman can't, so we have to.
Yeah, I mean, God, that's a horrible comparison. Like, not being liked in high school has never led to, the threat of imminent nuclear war.
Yeah.
Anyway. Man, we're running long. Okay, one more set of high points. Can I go first?
I wish that you would.
There's one essay in here which I didn't particularly enjoy, but I found it eerily prescient. It's called Pong Times Infinity, and it's basically a short rant about how all video game criticism is actually consumer advocacy, and there need to be more people writing experiential criticism of games. And, like, while this was published in 2004, there were already people doing that. It really started happening on a larger scale a couple years later with the whole kind of new games journalism movement. And I think, like, the Tim Rogers and the Leigh Alexanders and the Tom Bissels of the world, I wonder if they were aware of this essay when that flashpoint occurred, because it really does feel like he predicted something that happened, and it almost makes me want to give him credit that he doesn't deserve.
This is a little tough because, again, you stole out, like, by far my favorite moment.
The Robert Plant quote.
Oh my God, that was so.
I feel like
so
as
good.
A reviewer, if the answer to one of your questions is why the fuck would I do that, you failed as an interviewer. I mean.
This was not so much a high point as one of the most interesting moments in the book for me. he says as a throwaway in one of his little intros, I've written a lot about tribute bands, quote, they often reflect what I like about rock and roll more than the authentic bands they replicate. And I actually had to stop and think through what I thought that meant. I was like, oh, so what is it that he likes about that? And I finally landed on something, and it helped me kind of crack where I think he's coming from.
I wonder if it's the same thing. You go first. I'm curious because I had a moment with that piece too.
I mean, I didn't have a moment with the piece. I thought that piece was a pile of crap.
Me too. But that
the
piece,
intro.
Yeah.
I think what he fundamentally likes is having his expectations met perfectly.
I think I agree 100%. And the fact that it's frozen in amber and never tries to evolve beyond the stuff that he likes.
It gives you exactly what you expect.
Like when you go to see a Cheap Trick cover band, they're never going to play any song that wasn't a hit. They're not going to play something off the album that came out like last year or whatever. You're going to hear Surrender. You're going to hear Dream Police, like.
But here's my problem. That exact same thing is going to happen when you go see Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick is not pushing the boundaries. Like, they are going to play one off the last album, but that song is like The Wild Man of Europe or something. That song fucking rules. If you like Cheap Trick at all, the one new song they give you is going to scratch your Cheap Trick itch. If you like AC/DC at all, I've probably told this story before, go see them. It will cost a huge amount of money, but they will give you everything you could possibly want from an AC/DC show.
I follow Cheap Trick on on Facebook because I'm a giant fan, right. And they post their set lists, and you're right. They're like 90%, like, here's the hits from the classics, maybe 2 songs from their recent records. Right. But they always open with fucking...
Hello There.
Hello There, yep. And they always close with Surrender, and you get Dream Police somewhere in the middle, so you're good to go.
Yep. I want to go off book a little bit as well and just close with a thing that Klosterman taught me that I probably should have learned earlier. And you see this learning under the title, When Someone Tells You Who They Are, Believe Them. Mm-hmm. And that's been a hard lesson for me to learn. But the first thing I read of his was Sex, Drug, and Cocoa Puffs. And the thing that I liked the most was his interrogation of the 1980s rivalry between the Celtics and the Lakers. And he breaks this down, and he has a completely unsuccessful attempt to say this was not about race, which
was totally about race.
Idiotic. But he tries to say, it transcends race. It was about everything, which is only a move you try to pull if you fundamentally do not understand race. But here's his little story. What I really remember most about the specific game he's talking about, but what I really remember most about the game that he was talking about was that I was just about the only kid at this basketball camp who wanted Boston to win. The only other people who liked the Celtics were the camp's coaches. I was the only bird apostle under the age of 35. If you liked the Celtics, it meant you liked your dad's team. And this is when I came to understand that I was actually rooting for the Republican Party. A couple pages later. So this is how I have come to make every decision in my life. I suss out the Celtics and Lakers dynamic in any given scenario, and then I go with Larry. I'm a Celtic person. For me, life is simple.
Ugh.
Like, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. That's a powerful lesson. That's a high point for me.
I feel like that's like the omitted one, like an omitted rule from Jordan Peterson's book. Complete with the same point, which is, I am ultra conservative, deal with it.
He's a reactionary. He's incurious. He's fundamentally not changed from when he was 12 and doesn't think that he should have to.
Well, speaking of fundamentally not changed, the state of this episode has fundamentally not changed since like an hour and 20 minutes ago when we started recording it. So maybe we should take a break and come back. And
it's been a while since we've taken a break to listen to Stained.
So let's take a break and listen to Stained.
When
not. People tell you who they are, believe them.
I like Stained.
Shut up! You talk too much.
right, welcome back. We've been having contrarian opinions and just saying fuck the normies for off mic for a couple hours, but we've decided to take a break, come back and record a very fast segment of games because holy shit, this is going to be a long episode. So let's start off with the most deep, normie offending counterculture segment in pop culture and podcasting history. This is Dramatic Readings. All right, so I'm going to begin with a little piece about a compare and contrast between the Ramones and Ratt. Guess who wins? Here we go. Trying very hard not to do a silly voice. Probably going to do it anyway. The Ramones never made a platinum record over the course of their entire career. Bands like the Ramones don't make platinum records. That's what bands like Ratt do. And Ratt was quite adroit at that task, doing it 4 times in the 1980s. The band's first album, Out of the Cellar, sold more than 1 million copies in 4 months, which is why the deaths of Dee Dee Ramone and Robin Crosby created such a mathematical paradox. The demise of Ramone completely overshadowed the demise of Crosby, even though Crosby co-wrote a song, Round and Round, that has probably been played more on FM radio and MTV more than every track in the Ramones' entire catalog. And what's weirder is that no one seems to think this imbalance is remotely strange. What the parallel deaths of Ramone and Crosby prove is that it really doesn't matter what you do artistically, nor does it matter how many people like what you create. What matters is who likes what you do artistically and what liking that art is supposed to say about who you are. Ratt was profoundly uncool, read populist, and the Ramones were profoundly significant, read interesting to rock critics. Consequently, you never have to Lego my ego. And also, it has become totally acceptable to say that the Ramones' I Want to Be Sedated changed your life. In fact, saying that would define you as part of a generation that became disenfranchised with the soullessness of suburbia, only to rediscover salvation through the integrity of simplicity. However, it is laughable to admit, without irony, that Ratt's I Want a Woman was your favorite song in 1989. That would mean you were stupid, and that your teenage experience meant nothing, and you probably had a tragic haircut. The reason Crosby's June 6th death was mostly ignored is that his band seemed corporate and fake and pedestrian. The reason Crosby's June 6th death was mostly ignored is that his band seemed corporate and fake and pedestrian. The reason Dee Dee Ramone's June 5th death will be remembered is that his band was seen as representative of a counterculture that lacked a voice. The contradiction is that the countercultures get endless media attention. The only American perspectives thought to have any meaningful impact are those that come from the fringes. The voice of the counterculture is, in fact, inexplicably deafening. Meanwhile, mainstream culture, i.e. the millions and millions of people who bought Ratt albums merely because that music happened to be the soundtrack for their lives, is usually portrayed as an army of mindless automatons who provide that counterculture with something to rail against. The things that matter to normal people are not supposed to matter to smart people.
Thanks, Richard Nixon, for invoking the silent majority.
Exactly, yeah.
So I got confused, and I'm going to go totally on brand, and my dramatic reading is going to come from the moment that I should have liked, but liked the least.
Oh, it involves Blue Oyster Cult.
Ding, 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 ding. It is in an article entitled Certain Rock Bands You Probably Like, and it's a hilarious attempt to suss out the 10 most accurately rated artists in rock history.
As opposed to underrated versus overrated, which Klosterman has a serious problem with because it's a common way of measuring things.
Right. So this is the rare transcendent moment of rock guyism. Your standard rock guy will want to talk to you about what is overrated versus what is underrated. Klosterman is going to one-up that entire genre by saying, no, these things are properly rated. And in this, we get moments like, we've talked about juxtapositions earlier. While I realize the incongruities of Bust a Move have absolutely nothing to do with Tone Loc, It somehow seems more central to Tone Loc's iconography than his role in the movie Posse, which was arguably the best movie about black cowboys I saw during the grunge era. That was not cut. That was left in.
Yeah.
Like, that could have been a Camel ad. You know what I mean? That could have been an ad for a CD disc changer. Like, there's no reason for that to exist. There's no reason for that to have been in print.
I agree.
Okay, anyway. On to my dramatic reading. The number 3 most accurately rated artist in rock history, Blue Oyster Cult. The BOC song everyone pays attention to is the suicide anthem Don't Fear the Reaper. This song is haunting, but not in a good way. It makes me nostalgic for hating the Moody Blues. However, the BOC song virtually no one pays attention to is the pro-monster plot-a-thon Godzilla.
What?
And that track is monster-crushingly beautiful. So, in final analysis, Blue Oyster Cult is accurately rated by accident. This occurs on occasion. The same phenomenon happened to Scottie Pippen.
Everybody likes Godzilla.
Everybody likes Godzilla. It gets played at every hockey game, for God's sakes.
I mean, yeah, I was just at a bar the other day that was playing like nothing but the big classic rock hits. And a Blue Oyster Cult song came on the jukebox, and you know what it wasn't? Don't Fear the Reaper. It was fucking Godzilla, because that song rules, and everyone knows it.
And everyone knows it.
Yeah. Just the other day, I plugged in my guitar for the first time in a while. You know what riff I played?
Godzilla.
You got it. It's a great song.
Which was written as an explicit... It's one of my favorite behind-the-scenes stories about BOC. They wrote that song because they were in a hotel room on tour, and they were like, we need something really heavy. And, like, they wrote that, and they were like, well, that's about the heaviest riff we can think of. And, like, yeah, that's a heavy riff, bro.
It is. It's great. Okay, let's play another game. Let's do a What Is Your Fave?
What is your fave? What is your fave? When you're presented with a list of options, what is your fave?
My fave is going to be returning these fuckers to the library.
All right. Well, in this case, what I've done is I found a section here from Fargo Rock City, which was what he describes as a completely unnecessary sidebar, which is once again a magical act of hand waving that, even though I wrote this, man, I don't know why they published it, so it's not my fault.
It's 374 pages, man.
Yeah. So what this is a list of the unknown local bands that were a big part of the underground Fargo rock scene, which seems to consist mostly of teenagers.
Uh-huh.
And I have a brief list here of bands and brief descriptions. I want you to tell me which one you would most want to go see in concert.
Okay, I'm actually going to double it up. I'm going to say which one I would want to go see a show in and which one I would want to be friends with and, like, carry their amps.
Okay. So here we go. First we have Orange 17, the most popular local act in town, especially among junior high kids. They seem to have a sense of humor, and many people think their vocalist looks like Kurt Cobain.
Ooh.
Bosk, a classic hardcore trio. Their bass player is a little scary. Standard, Bosk, but without the guitar player.
Whoa.
Bootlick, an unorthodox blues grunge band. Bombshell, the best-known all-female punk trio in Fargo history. John Smith. In July of 1994, local promoter Jed Nielsen predicted John Smith would take over the world. 7 O'Clock Sucker, the prototypical garage band. I'm pretty sure their drummer is from Milner, North Dakota, and if I remember correctly, he used to have a decent jump shot in high school. Gummy, definitely not a punk band, as they supposedly like Kiss. Pathos, a South Fargo band, described by Bombshell drummer Sarah Hassel as underrated. Martian, a West Fargo high school outfit. They're cutting a 7-inch on Meat Records.
Yes.
Whirl. Hang on, let me pronounce that correctly. Whirl. A high school skater band. And finally, misleadingly, Trans Am, yet another high school skater band. Carl Quayle of Orange 17, a.k.a. the aforementioned Cobain clone, once said he was a fan of their music. It should be noted this is not Trans Am from Touch and Go Records.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was curious all of a sudden. I gotta say, I think Standard the hardcore band, but like without the guitar player.
They're like a two-piece.
Number one, that sounds musically interesting to me. And number two, if you're helping a band load in and load out, you want to pick the two-piece, not the three-piece, not the four-piece, and so on and so on.
I think I would want to hang out with Martian just because I would love to be involved with the Meat Records extended scene.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
How could you not? Hey, did you get that new Meat 7-inch?
No, but I've got their next compilation. It's called The Other White Meat.
Oh.
Anyway, let's play one more game here real fast.
Let's get into hour 3.
Yeah. This is Most Famous Fan.
The rich and the famous, but they read books too. The rich and the famous, but they're only a little better than you.
All right. So, of the people Mr. CK profiled in his... Oh, my God. I'm going to make T-shirts for the show that are the CK logo, but with Chuck and Klosterman on them.
It would
and we're
be
going to
great,
sell
but
several.
those initials are a little problematic as of late.
I'm ignoring that. I'm going to... forging ahead.
Yes.
Masculinely. Okay. Here are the people that he profiles. And I'm going to read them to you, and you're going to pick which one of those people is post-profile Chuck Klosterman's biggest fan.
Okay.
Britney Spears.
Nope.
Bunu. Val Kilmer. Morgan Spurlock. Steve Nash. Robert Plant. Jack White. Meg White. Radiohead. Jeff Tweedy. Billy Joel. Mike Skinner from the street. Has this guy ever interviewed someone who wasn't white?
No.
Even one person?
Gilbert Arenas he talks to for like 40 minutes or 40 seconds, I believe.
I guess some Mexican-American teenagers in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so out of that list, I'm probably going to say the guy from the streets just because he makes him sound like a real badass, even though, like, I mean, controversial opinion here, the streets were not that good. Talk rapping isn't any better if you do it with an accent than if you do it without. I'm still a big fan of rhythm in my hip-hop music.
All right, let's just burn these final bridges. Shit, what is that really terrible band that everybody likes? The English rap band.
There's a lot of them.
Not Cheater Slicks.
The Sneaker Pimps.
I love the Sneaker Pimps. They had one good song, and that's more than most bands. No, they're
the only
Slayford
English
Mods.
rap I know about.
Slayford Mods.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
The most boring music. Like, they're a great idea, but they make the most boring music of all time. Shit, I guess I just said the opinion.
You did. I'm a big fan of grime. I am not a big fan of garage. I don't like the steps. I will take Roots Manuva any day.
All right.
Cool. But yeah, I'll tell you who is not.
So you're saying you might be a bit of a skepta?
I think so, yeah. I'll tell you who's not his biggest fan is Billy Joel, who evidently threatened to sue the publication.
Oh my God. The astonishing disingenuousness of Klosterman's defense of his Billy Joel profile, which is 100%, I met Billy Joel and he's a drunk sad sack. And
he really wants to get laid.
And it's hilarious how divorced and single he is. Like, that is the text of the article. And his defense of it is, I can't understand why Billy Joel got mad at the article. He didn't dispute any of the quotes. Motherfucker, there's such a thing as a framing device. And your framing device is literally Billy Joel is a pudgy sad sack.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, again, I do not blame Billy Joel one bit for being upset about that.
Oh, this is the first time I've been team Billy Joel in a long time. Although I will say I've had some off-air conversations about this. Do I dispute that Billy Joel has written some freaking bangers? Obviously, I don't dispute that. Billy Joel has written some freaking bangers. Like, I have cried to Billy Joel songs, but on the other hand, I have cried more than 3 times listening to the Scorpions. So
valid point. I was going to say the article does mention Where's the Orchestra, which is an amazingly touching song, I feel like. But on the other hand, every rose has its thorn will get me if I'm in the right mood.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And by the way, did Billy Joel dispute any of his own quotes? Probably not. Maybe what he was objecting to is when you went and talked to Robert Christgau, the completely unreadable, quote, Dean of American Rock Critics, where he just says Billy Joel is a craftsman and makes boring music. Maybe that's why Billy Joel thought you were throwing him under the bus, CK. Just a thought.
Yeah. Oh,
munch.
Yeah, that whole profile was, disingenuous at best.
Yeah, and his defense of it was just such a despicable pile of nonsense.
I don't see why he wouldn't have liked it. I didn't say he was a bad person. I just implied it.
I just suggested his dick didn't work and he was bummed about it, and that's why he drank so much. I don't understand why he's so mad. Why is everybody so mad at me all the time?
Oh, no. All right. So, speaking of drinking too much, let's take a break and grab another beer, and we'll come back with our final segment. And holy shit, this probably will be a 2-hour-long episode. We'll be back.
That goes for all you punks in the press that want to start shit by printing lies instead of the things we said. That means you, Andy Setzer at Hit Parader, Circus Magazine, Mick Wall at Kerrang, Bob Guccione Jr. at Spin. What, you pissed off because your dad gets more pussy than you? Fuck you! Suck my fucking dick! You be ripping off the fucking kids while they be paying their hard-earned money to read about the bands they want to know about? Printing lies, starting controversy. You want to antagonize me? Antagonize me, motherfucker! Get in the
Whew, finally. We're done getting all of that off our chests. And as I said earlier...
Free at last.
As I said earlier, I think the reason this book upset me such a great deal is that I saw way too much of myself in it, and I needed to kind of get the venom out, as they say. So we're done sucking the snake bite.
For me, I think that this might have been the final nail in the coffin of the idea that people who like the things I like must be people I like.
Yeah, that's why I stopped hanging out with other punk rock fans like many, many years ago. But I feel you, for sure. So let's move on to recommending things that are not this book. Why don't you go first? Because mine is Craven, and it should be saved for last.
Okay, I'm going to recommend a intriguing newsletter by a woman named Molly Young. Her newsletter is called Read Like the Wind. It is just a collection of interesting book recommendations. One thing that I want to single her out for is that she writes great blurbs. Like, you really feel like you know what the book is about in 35 words, and that is an incredibly hard skill that I want to commend her for. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Molly Young, Read Like the Wind. It's fun, even if you don't chase down the recommendations.
All right, so for me, I'm going to be a huge asshole here, but just because I'm very proud of it, I'm going to recommend the first album I've released in about 3.5 years commercially, which you can find at merostomata.bandcamp.com. That's merostomata.bandcamp.com. It's a horseshoe crab. And it's pretty unique. It's different from a lot of the music I've done in the past. It's very introspective and serious and swirly, and you may or may not like it, but you can listen to some songs there and find out. So check that out, because I made it, and I am not above promoting my own shit on the podcast. So fuck you, haters.
Will there be a link to it in the show notes?
I hope so. There's also a cassette version that is being released by Bookburner Press, which is run by former guest Jesse Dangerously. So, there's like all sorts of connections to the podcast, and I'm not just self-promoting for the sake of self-promoting, except I am. I'm actually very happy you recommended it, because here I was thinking that, like, I met you and you stopped making music. So I'm glad to feel like I'm not actually a human mute button. No, it had lots more to do with having to work out a bunch of shit. And I think this record reflects that. It's not what I would say upbeat, but hopefully you will enjoy it. Anyway. I spent my own money to buy my own copy. Jesse, if you want to send me my cassette, that would be great. But in the meantime, due to Bandcamp's awesomeness as a platform, it's available as a streaming service and as a download. Yes, and there are instrumentals of every single song if you get it. So even if you hate the sound of my voice, you can listen to those fat beats. And if you hate the sound of either of our voices, do not add us. Yeah, and you probably wouldn't have made it 145 or an hour and 45 minutes into this podcast. Okay, so sometimes people who make it through all of our shows send us correspondence, so I believe we've got a lot of letters.
A, letter B, letter C, letter D, letter E, letter F, letter G, letter, got a lot of letters.
We should note that it's much better when you write us a letter after you've finished listening to it instead of hitting pause on the first thing you disagree with and
point.
firing off a little missive. Anywho, this is one of the funniest subject lines I've seen in many a long week. It is called Literacy Woohoo, and it is by Wesley, fake last name, and it goes like so. Hi, JW and Chris. Just wanted to say I freaking love this podcast, and it makes LA traffic a little more bearable, especially compared to some of the books you guys read. Personally, I like to think compared to all of the books we read, but then, okay.
There's been a couple good ones.
Also, if you ever take a crack at YA again, you should check out Model Land by Tyra Banks. Yes, that Tyra Banks. That's all I'll say. Looking forward to your next episode, Wesley, fake last name.
So Model Land is a book that comes up frequently for us. But it's unfortunately, it's very well-trod ground in the world of Bad Books podcasts, of which I think there are 4. But our friends over at Worst Bestsellers have done a full-length episode about it. You should check them out for sure. I believe Read It and Weep has done a full-length episode about it. You should check that out. I don't think we're going to go back to that well. It's kind of like, you know how podcasts about movies, most of them won't do The Room now because there's been so many. Model Land kind of exists in that same plane, which is not to insult your recommendation, just to say that there are many other people who are more in the demographic of that book that have already addressed it. And
especially Worst Bestsellers, they have deep interest in and knowledge of YA and are not middle-aged white dudes.
Exactly. Yeah, so I would definitely look up the Worst Bestsellers take on it because they'd be funnier about it than us, and probably it would come across as less weird and mean-spirited.
The other recommendation I will give is that a few years ago, we did a bad book party. And in that, our friend Lemon from the F Plus podcast did what I consider to be like the definitive just reading from Model Land.
Yeah.
And that's
great.
That's in our back catalog, so you can check that out. That's probably the most we will wrap our arms around that one. So hopefully that's enough. Like there's 2 other recommendations for where to go for Model Land.
It is a incredibly hilarious and silly book, but there are better people to make fun of it than us. I would definitely, though, I agree. Go back, find that live episode, listen to Lemon's reading. Every time he says the word Sookie, it makes me laugh so hard.
Yeah. So that's it for this episode. If you want to email us, you can do so at idon'tevenonatelevision@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at IDEOTVpod. We're on Twitter at the same place. We have a Facebook group that is a phenomenal place to keep in touch with crabs, bad books, really bad books, failed rappers trying to dropkick failed rap rockers off the stage.
That's going to be posted 100 times by the time this album comes out. But yeah, if you didn't know, Shaggy 2 Dope from the Insane Clown Posse tried to throw a WWE-style dropkick on Fred Durst during a concert recently.
Yeah.
But I got to say, reading the article, pretty sure it was a work, brother.
I got to say, having looked at the screen grab from somebody's cell phone video, Shaggy gets a lot of air.
But they were professionally trained.
I'm legit impressed at how high up he got to throw that drop kick. Like, regardless of its realness, fakeness, whatever, just as an entertainer, this is by a wide margin the most entertained I've ever been by anything Shaggy did.
I agree, 100%.
Also, Shaggy, if you want to drop kick Chuck Klosterman, please email me and I will move heaven and earth to make that happen.
Or if you'd like to drop kick Jesus through the goalposts of life for whatever. I don't know. One thing I did want to mention, and this should be relevant around the time this episode's released, Saturday the 27th, I will be in Seattle with the F Plus to perform at F Plus Live, a West Coast edition. Just going to be doing a reading. It's not an I Don't Even Own a Television event, but I will be there. So if you'd like to come and say hi and get some free stickers and merch and shit, come check it out. I forget the name of the venue, but if you look on the F Plus site, it's all there.
It'll be in the show notes. Also, if you want to support us, this episode is, like all episodes, brought to you by the people who help us out on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/IDEOTVpod. What is Patreon? It's a way you can kick us a little money on an ongoing basis from $1 a month all the way up to $20 a month. Really helps us out. This month, we had some massive equipment failures that cost us literally hundreds of dollars. And the fact that people help us out on Patreon helped us absorb that without, being forced to either delay shows or give you subpar sounding shows.
Yeah, for sure. Basically, I mean, my monitor speakers died, and I had to mix an entire episode on headphones, which sucked, and it sounds like crap compared to the rest of our catalog, which you may have noticed if you've heard the last episode. And it was very nice to be able to replace those speakers without having to, not eat for 2 weeks. So Thank you so much to everyone who supports the show.
And if you really want to go above and beyond, drop us a review. But the best thing you can possibly do, surely you know a friend who likes lighthearted humor. You might even in these fallen times, know a friend who likes to read books. Those are the kinds of people that I recommend. Just mention the show to them. Tell them they might like it.
Spread the word, dudes, and everyone else that is not dudes. Dudes is one of those terms, To me, it means everyone, but to some people, it doesn't. So, spread the word, folks.
Yeah, exactly. You. Hey, you. Spread the word.
I'm not confused like you